Everyone to our feminine Kabbalah class. This is actually part two because we did begin talking about this subject 2 weeks ago, and then we stopped last week to speak about the holiday of Shavuot that was coming up, and now we're going to continue because obviously this is quite a big topic with a lot of different elements to it. So we're going to try focus on a slightly different part of it this evening. So I'm going to start with a question that I'd like to present to you. I'll share the screen so that you can see the question. You can just think about it for a moment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So here goes. Okay, so have you ever watched someone, especially a loved one, get involved in a situation where you know they would fail or there would be a negative outcome? Would you or did you A, get involved, B, keep quiet? Okay, and which approach do you think is most effective? Now it could be that it depends on the situation, but I'll just give you a minute to think about that. Do you think it's wiser to get involved when somebody that you care about is about to make a mistake or do something foolish, or do you think it's better to keep quiet?
It depends how terrible it's going to be.
Okay.
Right. Of course, the best is not to get involved because then you will learn the best. But it's not easy all the time.
Right. Okay. Good point. So you learn better. You're saying, Shuri, that a person learns better by experiencing it by themselves instead of being told by somebody else.
And you know it when you were like a teenager and your mother tell you all the time. You will never listen till you will learn it. So that's the best. But of course, our nature is to protect others. So like you will say something, you protect, and then you will think and maybe say, you know what, try it. But I think it's very hard to hold yourself when you see somebody you love and you know it's going to get hurt. It's very hard.
Of course, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody have something else?
Well, initially, I would stay quiet, and I would hope that the person would, present it to me and ask my opinion, which probably would not happen. And then, if possible, try to encourage them to talk it out with me or somebody else. But I don't know if that would work either.
Right. So you want to give them your advice, but you hope or somehow try and find a way for them to be the one to come to speak to you or to speak to somebody else that's reliable instead of just going ahead and telling them on your own what you think.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, they might listen to you. They might be more likely to listen to you in that way. Okay. Anybody else have something to share?
I think it's good to get involved, but just to do it like in a loving way, not like in a prying way or saying that you're doing something wrong, but just more to just be kind of open and let them know that you're there for them.
Right, right. Okay, so we're going to use this question to get into our topic today about masculine and feminine energy. Obviously, we are going to be focusing more on the feminine energy because that's the topic tonight, but it does help us to contrast it sometimes with what the masculine energy is. So just to summarize a little bit, last time we spoke about the way that God created the world. God didn't just jump straight into creating a physical world. The physical world is actually the culmination of a process which began in a spiritual way. God first had certain spiritual things that he had to do before the physical world was able to come into being. And the reason for that is because God, being infinite, being all-encompassing, being all-powerful, being the only true and ultimate existence or being that really is, God filled everything. And there was no space for the creation of anything at all, because nothing can really exist outside of God. So in order to create a world where things can exist with a seeming independence from God, there was a certain process that God had to go through. And we discussed that in some detail last time. And basically it was a process where God had to sort of filter and diminish this intense light, this intense divine aura, so that there could make space for created beings to come into existence. Now, in discussing this process, we came to the understanding that there's different energies involved in this. There's the energy where God holds back his light, and then there's the energy where God lets forth light in order to create something. And we divided those into the masculine and feminine categories. We said it's more of a masculine trait when we are projecting outwards. For example, when we breathe out, that is just a metaphor, shall we say, for the impact that we have in our environment. That would be like the light that God does reveal and the light that God holds back. A metaphor for inhaling is an inward motion, an inward energy, and that energy is the female energy. So that's sort of just to summarize in very short, really what we spoke about in the previous class. But I do want to elaborate on one point, which I'm not sure we really got to in detail, which is the sphirot, which are the divine attributes, the spiritual divine energies that God uses to create the world. Now, I believe I did mention them last week, but I'm just going to put them here on the screen for you so that you can see them. So we have over here 10 sphirot, okay? So 10 divine attributes. I've put them in 2 columns. So starting from the left side, Chokhmah is wisdom, Bina, understanding, Da'at, knowledge, Chesed is kindness, Gevurah is strength, Tiferet, beauty, Netzach, victory, Hod is splendor, Yesod is foundation, and Malchut is kingship. Okay, now obviously each and every one of these attributes is an entire concept in its own right, and we can do a class or 2 or 5 just explaining and elaborating on what each one of these things means, what they represent, what they cause. But that's not the focus of tonight's class, so we're not going to be able to go into that today. These English translations are really just sort of references to each one of the 10 sphirot, each one of the 10 divine attributes. They're not a complete treatment in any way of what each of these concepts are. So I just wanted to point that out. What I do want to focus on today is the fact that here we have 10 sphirot, we have 10 divine attributes. The first 3, Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, are related more to the person's intellect or to God's intellect. The next 7 from Chesed, Gvurah, all the way down to Malchut, relate more to emotions inside a person. But the point that I want to really focus on today is the last sphira, the last one of the 10 sphirot, the final one of the 10 attributes, which is Malchut at the bottom where it says kingship, right over here, okay? Now, even though Malchut is one of the 10 sphirot and it's the last one of the 7 emotional attributes, there is actually a difference between Malchut and the preceding 10 sfirot. Each of the sfirot beforehand, they each have a specific thing that they contribute. Okay, so let's say chesed is kindness, giving, bestowing. Gvura is restraint, holding back, right? We have to sometimes measure how much we give. We can't just give without thinking or without weighing. We have to know how and where and what to give. For example, and we go through the chain. Each one contributes something. Each one has a distinct character, a distinct purpose. So in the chain of creating the world, each one of the sfirot contributes something specific in that spiritual progression. Now, when we come to the actual point where we have the physical world come into being, how do we get from these 10 spiritual divine attributes to a physical world? Where is that transition? Where comes the point that those spiritual sfirot can become manifest in a physical way and the physical world can be created? So that is where Malchut, the final sphera, the final attribute, comes in. Malchut is that divine attribute which doesn't have its own distinct characteristic. It's actually referred to in Kabbalah as Malchut has nothing that is its own. Okay, now what does that mean? It has nothing that is its own. Malchut sort of just processes and unites and harmonizes all the things that came before it and enables them to project forward and become an actual creation and come into an actual physical world. So it might sound or seem like a deficiency that Malchut doesn't have its own particular characteristic or own particular character trait like the other ones coming before it. But the truth is that is what allows Malchut to be an effective transmitter, an effective unifier. If Malchut would start to come in with its own agenda, it would change the things that have taken place before it. It would add to it. But would it be able to truly unite all the other sfirot and bring them properly down into a physical manifestation? Not really. Another point to add to that is, besides for this power that Malchut has, because it doesn't have its own specific defining characteristic, that Malchut is actually bringing to fruition God's original intention. We have all these wonderful sfirot, we have Chokhmah, Binah, etc., etc., etc. They each have tremendous power. They each have a tremendous contribution. But if we don't have Malchut, then the world doesn't come into existence and the world is not created. Why did God set this whole chain into motion? Because he wanted the world to be created. And Malchut is the one that achieves and accomplishes this.
So why it's the last one? It should be the first one.
Because once everything else is, well, it's a very good point that you're making, Shiri, actually, because there's a statement that says Na'ut tchilatan b'sofan b'sofan b'tchilatan, that the beginning and the end are wedged together, which means that something that comes last really has a root and a source which is right at the beginning from the higher place. Let me give you an example to help you understand this. Imagine a wall that's standing straight and you knock the wall down. Which bricks will fall furthest away? The bricks that are at the top of the wall. The ones that are at the bottom of the wall, they might not even fall. They might stay connected to the wall as the top of the wall falls. So somebody who came to the scene and sees a brick on the floor will think, oh gosh, this brick has been sitting here for thousands of years. It's just on the ground. But what they don't realize is that there was originally a wall here And that brick was actually at the top of the wall. So in the spiritual world, it's the same. In the physical world and spiritual world, it's a similar idea. Sometimes something can look like it's at its last, it's at the end, it's the least important or the least valuable, but really it actually has a source that is higher than what seems to be valuable and important. So it's a very good thing that you're bringing up, and Malchut has this quality. Malchut has a source which is actually higher than all of the 10 attributes that we discussed, that we just mentioned before. But in order for all these 10 attributes to actually reach their potential and create a physical world, Malchut is there at the end to make sure that that happens. So what does this have to do with feminine energy? So the truth is that in Kabbalah, a woman, the feminine is called Malchut, okay? We are spiritually compared to this. We're considered to be a reflection of this spiritual attribute called Malchut, okay? So let me just give you an example in a very practical way. There are times, and often perhaps this is a stereotype that people have been trying to fight in modern times, which is that the woman, her place is, so to say, behind the scenes, right? Or the man is the one is seen as dominating and having a big, strong impact, while the woman is more soft-spoken and on the side, okay? Now, when I put it in that light, it doesn't sound very positive at all, right? It seems like the woman is lacking or weak in a certain way. But I'd like to challenge you to look at it a little bit differently, because if we think about it, we'll realize that the fact that the feminine has this energy of being able to put themselves aside, of being able to not focus so much on what their own contribution, their own opinion is, but to facilitate something else or to allow something else to process, it's actually something really very powerful. And let me give you two examples to illustrate what I mean. Let's say you want to plant flowers, you want to plant vegetables, something you want to plant, okay? We've all had plenty of time at home now. Different people have taken up different hobbies. Some people have gotten some more into gardening. And you take your shovel, your rake, you turn the earth over and you put the seeds in, okay? Now, the seed goes into the soil. And what happens? The soil takes the material of the seed, whatever it is that's within it, and the soil then processes that seed material in a certain way, and with care and with nurturing and with the right sunlight and water, etc. After days and weeks and months, something will sprout, a plant will grow, a flower will grow, something beautiful will come out of it. Now, the soil, what does it have in its own right? Okay. The soil seems to just be this kind of passive receiver of the seed. But there's a power there of processing or facilitating, which enables the seed to reach its potential, to flower, to grow, and to produce something life-giving or something beautiful, whether it's a vegetable or a fruit, or whether it is a beautiful plant or a flower. Which obviously the seed on its own can't do. You know, you have a bag of seeds, it will stay a bag of seeds. Nothing's going to grow out of it. Even if there's 100 seeds in there, you won't get any flowers. But it's the ground that enables that to happen. Now, let's talk about, let's bring another example, which is more in our day-to-day lives, okay? when somebody talks to you, when one person talks to the other, okay, somebody has something on their mind, they want to get it off their chest, they want somebody else to listen to them, okay? So who's considered a good listener? A good listener is somebody who does what's known as reflective listening, right? So if person A shares a problem that they have or something difficult that they're going through, reflective listening is when the listener hears the person out, sympathizes or empathizes with the situation, and really is just a sounding board for them, okay? Enables person A to process whatever situation they've been through or whatever challenge they're facing. And really, in that kind of way, the speaker is actually, if they're given enough space and enough time, the speaker is usually able to come up on their own with solutions to the problem that they're facing, or a way to gain new energy to face whatever obstacle it is, and not to despair. So the listener is not creating anything new necessarily, right? They could just be listening. They could just be repeating back to the person who's speaking what they're saying. Oh, I hear, oh, wow. Is that really what happened to you, right? And in this kind of way, new ideas come out, and it's not because of anything that the listener has said. And in fact, if the listener would jump in and give their opinion, or say, 1 second, why are you doing this? You should do that. The speaker might or might not take on the suggestion of the listener, but it won't last as long, and it won't be as effective as if the person themselves came up with it on their own. So another example, in education, I think in modern education, much more than in previous times, nowadays we see less and less of the frontal teaching, where the teacher stands in front of the classroom and just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, and the students are either listening or not listening, or they're writing it down and they can repeat it back. But who knows if they'll remember it tomorrow? Who knows if they'll be able to apply it to a new situation, okay? There are new methods now whereby the teacher is encouraged to be more of a facilitator, that the child has their own process of learning, their own process of developing skills, and the teacher is there to sort of just encourage, put the right materials or the right experiences in the child's path to enable the child on their own to learn, to discover, to develop skills. And then the child owns the knowledge, owns the education in a much greater and stronger way, and can use it in a much wider variety of ways. So all these examples are really to bring out how facilitating or creating, being that person who creates a space for someone to process things, is actually something that's really very powerful. It's very life-giving, and it's transformative, really. And it achieves much stronger results than just being told what to do or just being given the formula to follow. And this is something that is really a very female character trait. And I did mention this last time, and I'll just mention it again, that today in relationships, in the workplace, this kind of characteristic is very much valued. A man who is able to bring this kind of atmosphere to a company or a workplace is very much looked up to, where employees and colleagues can each have their opportunity to contribute, their opportunity to develop their own talents in a way that contributes to the greater good of the company and of the workplace. So while we describe Malchut as not having any specific definition of its own, it turns out that Malchut can accomplish so much more than what it is. And it also can accomplish so much more than an individual divine attribute, because each individual divine attribute, the other ones, they're limited to their particular distinctive definition and characteristics. Whereas Malchus, this final attribute, the feminine attribute, is not limited in that way. So this is also why the female is called or known as the receiver, okay? Again, receiving sounds like a very passive thing, but it's not at all passive, because the receiving is really creating a space for the other person, creating a space for something to happen, and for something to be nurtured, for something to grow and to be transformed. Are there any questions so far, or comments or disagreements?
All right.
Okay.
I'm understanding what you're saying. Like to say, I'm understanding what you're saying.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I am.
Hi, Mrs. Collins. Can you hear us?
Who just said that?
Yeah,
And can you see us? Can you hear us?
I agree also, like with it's not easy, but I agree.
Oh yeah, it's not right. It's you're 100% right. It's much easier to
Easier than the first class. The first one was harder.
Can you hear us? I can't hear you.
we spoke a lot in more abstract terms in
I
last
think
class.
I can't tell if you're on the phone or not.
I'm hearing somebody. I'm hearing
Is
somebody.
there someone talking? Is there
I'm
someone
not
else?
sure who it is. I just don't want to be ignoring anyone, but I'm not clear on whose screen it's coming from. I'm sorry.
So like you're saying that the soil, about the planting the seeds and the soil, so that the soil is like a nutrient for the growth and bringing that around to, this feminine energy and Malhut. Am I understanding this correctly? Yeah, okay.
I do want to, so I do want to add at the end of all this discussion, which I think we touched on last time as well, that this type of attitude or this type of character trait, it's not something that only women can do. I'm sure we all know men who are able to create a space for somebody else, to enable, to facilitate, to encourage, to support, to nurture, right? A husband can be his wife's, can be a very big support for his wife in something that she is looking to accomplish and she is looking to do. I know that personally for myself. There are things that I'm able to do and accomplish because of my husband's encouragement and because he enables me to do it. So the fact that we describe or define certain things as masculine energy or feminine energy or relating to the male or to the female, it's not because it's something restricted only to males or only to females. The point is, however, that when we're looking overall at our essence, okay, when we're looking at the essence of the feminine, and we want to know what is the emphasis, right? What is the emphasis for us as women? While we surely can have specific defined roles, we can surely have certain places or positions where we might be in a more dominant position. The emphasis is more in the way of everything that we've been describing today. So when God gave the commandments, and there are many commandments which are equal to men and to women, but there are some that are specifically for men and some are specifically for women. it's again because of this essence, this feminine and masculine difference, okay? And it sort of directs us as to where we're supposed to be emphasizing what we're doing in our service of God, in the way that we impact our families, in the way that we impact society and the world around us. So I'll just give you an example. In the Chabad Hasidic community, so the way that the education goes is that the Rebbe would always encourage and advocate for after elementary school and high school, attending a yeshiva, possibly becoming a rabbi. That was always very important. But on more than one occasion, there were instances where there would be a student in college, a college student who had become interested in Judaism and become interested in learning more, and perhaps taken time off from their studies to attend the yeshiva so that they could become more knowledgeable and accustomed to Jewish learning and Jewish thought and Jewish life. And there were a number of occasions where these yeshiva students felt, okay, I've come into this world. Religious Judaism speaks to me. There's so much here that I want in my life. I'm just going to leave my degree and I'm going to become a rabbi. And on more than one occasion, when the Rebbe heard that these students wanted to do this, the Rebbe would direct them that no, of course, finish your year in yeshiva or whatever time you need to be able to learn as much as you feel like you need for your Jewish life. But it's very important for you to go back to university and finish up your degree and become a doctor, a lawyer, philosopher, whatever field, an engineer, whatever field it was that they were in. And why was this? Because the Rebbe felt that people can impact the world in different ways. And somebody who is committed to Judaism and is able to be successful in university and their particular field and go on to become well-known possibly, can have a very great influence in that arena. Now, really, we know that there are rabbis who go to universities to teach students, to encourage them, to give them some Jewish identity. So why couldn't the Rebbe just say, oh, well, you know what, you can influence as a rabbi? Why was the Rebbe intent on this fact that you should go to well in the field and have influence that way? And if I may say, I think that it's this kind of difference between the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine. The masculine energy is one that imposes godliness on something. There was little godly light in the world, and God imposed his light into the world. Okay, that's a masculine energy. When you reveal the goodness that's inherent in a situation, the godliness and the holiness that's inherent in a creation, that's a feminine energy. So whereas a rabbi might come along and to university and impose, obviously in a friendly, kind way, but bring Judaism in that kind of more imposing way, a professor who is looked up to and is a religious Jew has more organic influence on his or her students and can affect them in different ways that might be even deeper than they might be able to do, because the professor might more easily be able to meet the students in a place where the rabbi wouldn't be able to because of the rabbi's background. So again, this is also emphasizing that this kind of approach of nurturing, of coming from within, of facilitating, it's not strictly in the female counterpart. It's something. It's an approach that can be adopted by males and females equally, and has been in more increasing ways as we develop in society. It's just really a question of where the emphasis lies. So as women, that gives us a strong strong knowledge that for us, the emphasis lies in these more feminine approaches, in these more feminine ways of looking at things, and in these more feminine ways of having an impact on others. And the fact that it's becoming more widespread throughout society, these abilities and these ideas are becoming more valued as we have come to the time that we are now, is actually a very significant and important development, because as it says about the time of the redemption, that in the time of Egypt, the Jewish people were redeemed because in the merit of the righteous woman. And in the time of the final redemption, which is the time that we're approaching now, again, it will be the women who will bring about the redemption. These feminine traits are very much a hallmark of the time of the Mashiach, which is the time of the redemption. Way back in the beginning, the world was much less infused with holiness. It was much more difficult to fight the battles of darkness against light. And really, the spiritual approach was to try and impose as much holiness on the world as possible. But now we're at a place where the world itself is receptive to these ideas. The world itself is receptive to the notion that we need to be kind to each other. We need to try and find the common good. We need to look out for each other, right? And these are all feminine. These are all feminine traits and feminine tendencies. So it's the fact that the world itself is heading in that direction is an indication that we really are closer to that time of the Mashiach. So this helps us understand some more of the feminine traits in a spiritual way, but more importantly in a practical way, in a way that it applies and takes place in our own lives, and helps us appreciate and understand really that power, that transformational ability that we have, not necessarily by giving somebody else our opinion or telling them what they should and shouldn't do, but by being that guide, being that space, being that that sounding board, or that ability to receive somebody else in such an open way, to allow a process to take place and to create something which is much greater and much goes much further than the original. So any questions, any comments on that? Does it resonate? Is it something have you thought in this direction before? I'm just curious.
I thought it was very good. It does resonate. It makes me feel we should have a female president too.
Right.
A female president with all these wonderful, caring